Go live. We are live now. This time we do not have the intro video because the intro video only works with screen sharing. And I was told when I tried to screen share that my browser might crash because there's apparently a bug. It's nice that they tell us, right, that the browser might crash. So we are live now for 37 seconds. And we'll see. Maybe we'll have a couple of viewers today because it's a different day than we usually stream, and it's even a different time. But now I will play our intro music and then I'll mute myself. Hello!
Oh, God.
inConversation 32 on July what is today? 26th of July. I think it's my sister's birthday today. Darn, I have to message her. I forgot. Well, it depends on which sister. I have two sisters. And one is always very keen on when I congratulate her, and the other one isn't. So I hope it's the other sisters. Tomorrow, the sister who likes being congratulated. So, but it's kind of funny, right, that the older sister is the one who doesn't really like to be congratulated, because there's nothing bad in getting older. The bad thing is in dying young, right? So, on that, bad thing is dying young.
Well, there used to be a punk clothing store in Washington D.C. that used to make all these T-shirts and all these products and stuff, and they used to sell other stuff. But their motto was "Too fast to live, too young to die."
Yeah, right. That's why I say
So, yeah.
getting old is not the bad thing. Dying young is.
Well, you're not old enough to know that getting old can be a really rotten thing, but that's a whole other topic.
Right. Okay, well, I don't wanna weigh up
Well, I'm not
get
complaining, by the way.
getting
No, I'm not
old
complaining.
in a bad way. You're not getting old in a bad way. I mean, look at
No,
you.
not at all. No, not at
Right?
all.
Just
But you know
I
what?
don't
Eventually it does catch up with you.
yeah, but well, that's just how it is. So
That's it.
hello,
Yeah.
welcome to inConversation 32. 32, I guess. And we'll continue. And I hope this time without audio problems. Hello to the chat. Steffi is on the chat. Chat. I don't know if she's on the jet. I presume not, because on the jet we'll have to switch off well, not so many jets. Still not so many jets flying. On the chat, James Chrisley is on the chat. Amy is on the chat. HSA. If I remember correctly, it's Eduardo, isn't it? Eduardo Piccini Photography. HSA. Right? Are there audio problems today? Hello, chat. Can you tell us if we have audio problems? And I'll put it on the chat. Audio okay this okay this time? Question mark. Because funnily enough, I made the announcement, right? And I wrote this time, hopefully without audio problems, and I set everything up. And and it sounded good in my headphones. And HSA Eduardo confirms that it's that it's him. So and everything sounded good. And I thank you, James, for confirming that the audio is good. So everything sounded good in my headphones. And for whatever reason, I clicked on that settings button and I saw that no audio is going through. And so for whatever reason, and I had to restart the computer. Whatever. What we're going to do today is we'll continue our last month's conversation, which was kind of a bit bug ridden. And so I think today will be all chill. And I even prepared the quotes that we're going to talk about, and we're going to superimpose them as so. But yeah, for those of you who haven't seen us or taken, didn't take part yet in our in conversation, the chat is live. You can chat with us during the live stream, right? So let's talk about this together, right? So if you have anything to say, and today I'm gonna I chose a couple of quotes that are a bit shorter than the last ones, and I would really, or we would really love to read your thoughts on that as well. And who is we? Of course, like always, Fernando, all things Fern on admin.
Yes.
Yeah, admin of
Go ahead.
luxlit.tumblr.com and luxlit.net. And then there's me, right? My name's Pete. I like pictures. And since this is very, very late in the evening where I am, right, I'm allowed to have a glass of red wine. So there are no kids. But this is not made for kids, this video. And you have a banana.
Yes.
He has
Well, one of the cool things about traveling now, I mean, the restaurants, most of the restaurants are closed, and the restaurants and the hotel are closed. So you have to go out and bring in your bags of food to the hotel. So yeah.
So
it's interesting times, I have to say.
There was no music intro. That's what I read. James wrote, no music intro. Okay. Then
By the way, I don't know how you feel about this, Pete, but if anybody wants to join us, you could always send them the link, and if they want to join
Please.
with just audio,
Yeah,
talk about
of course.
that's fine too.
It's kind of we wanted to do it. We wanted to do this conversation like we did it usually on a Saturday evening because, well, that's just how we did that, right? But then like chaos struck, and we were forced to change the planned, because this time, right? I was the one. Usually Fern is the one messaging, do you have time when we're gonna do it? Well, which is fine, right? I appreciate that. And this time I was the one who confirmed it by himself, right? So I write, well, I want to confirm this conversation for the 25th.
Yeah.
And then something, well, just got in the way again. So, and we thought we want to do it this month.
And you know what
works, right? Pardon?
Right. No, and what's funny is in all this time that we've been doing it, the only time we did it at not our regular time was when I went to Munich almost 2 years ago.
True. And then we did
and that was at the beginning of the month. It was Oktoberfest, and that's when I was there.
Yeah, no Oktoberfest this year. So,
of course, and there's not going to be any drunk Germans out in the streets. No, that'll never happen.
No, we don't have drunk people on the streets. So yeah, if you want to join, no matter if with audio only or video, of course we'd love to see your faces, right? But you can do it audio only. You can send me a message either today, of course, or anytime. So if you want to join us in this conversation, just message me when you're in Tumblr, message to @tvoom, or message Fern, right? All things Fern on Tumblr, or you can also email me. My email is on my YouTube in the about, so no problem to find my email, right? So email me, and we're gonna set this thing up. and we'd love to talk with you about all photography related things. So much for the intro.
And by the way, I want to add one thing. This is a first because Pete talks so much that we actually had to continue the conversation
Right.
for a new session.
Right. I'm the
I
one
had
who
to say it.
talks so much. I'm the only
Yes.
one. I'm the only one on these conversations who talks so much. So okay, let's start. Let's jump
Yeah.
right in with the first quote that I picked. A portrait is not made in the camera, but on either side of it, by Edward Steichen.
Oh yeah.
So, thoughts? What I
Well,
love
it's interesting that the first one. Well, go ahead.
Oh, no, start, please.
No, go ahead. Well, so it's interesting that you chose a quote by Edward Steichen because I just posted, I want to say like 3 or 4 days ago, the PBS documentary, American Masters documentary or show about Alfred Stieglitz, who for many years partnered with Edward Steichen to create photography and to run an art gallery that they ran and possibly one of the very first photography magazines. Excuse me. At least in the U.S. And it immediately when I heard that, immediately what I thought of was how Alfred Stieglitz was so influenced by Georgia O'Keeffe, who eventually became his lover and his wife. And not that she influenced his style, but her persona influenced his style of photography, actually, because until about that time when she came into his life, he wasn't really doing that many portraits. But once she came in, he started to discover this whole world of not just with using her as a model, but others. But yeah, and this is and the other thing is, I mean, for me, taking pictures of people, there's usually that communication. So that's what I don't believe in showing, that you capture the person's soul. I think you capture a moment and you capture maybe a portion of who they are in that moment. But even with the building photographs that I do and so on, to me it's still a conversation, and it's something where that I'm photographing is still influencing what I photograph, and it also very much influences what I do in post in camera raw. So yes, to me this is lovely, makes perfect sense. Yes. People not talking.
Amy wrote, Fern, you're missing a ball cap. LOL.
I'm missing what? Oh, I can do that.
Cap.
Hold on. Oh yeah, it's right here.
So now we're talking. So what I find very, very interesting is this the way it's worded, right? And it's it's because it's very, very there's no, a portrait is not made in the camera, but on either side of it. So the camera doesn't matter as a part of the creation process. Of course, it's needed. Without a camera, we couldn't take a photograph, right? But in the process of creating a portrait, the camera is unimportant, which is kind of interesting. Of course, I mean, there's this, especially in portrait photography, and I saw that last year so so often, simply because I did a lot of research before I got my new camera. Um, there were I watched a lot of videos, even though I knew I knew the results already, but it was a good confirmation for me. Can you take portraits with cameras that are not full frame cameras, when we're talking about digital cameras, right? And it's just, of course you can. And of course, photos usually, or in general, portraits taken with a full frame camera, or even a camera with an even bigger sensor, will look different than portraits that we take with a camera with a smaller sensor, for various reasons. I don't want to do the whole tech thing now, right? But of course,
Well,
we can take
and
portraits. There's so much variety in portraits. You certainly cannot take a very specific type of portraiture with a camera that is not a full frame camera. But I bet, and I bet a lot of money, that like 90% of all people, 99% of all people, would, even in this very specific case, wouldn't see a difference. And because
well,
there's so much more to a portrait, or in general to a photograph. And this has nothing to do with, oh, doesn't know anything about photography, or oh, is just an amateur, or anything, right? There's so much more to a photograph, and especially a portrait, than the sensor size, which,
yes.
of course, there's blah blee bloop, depth of field, blee blah blue,
But, but Pete,
the
there's also
dynamic range, and there are a lot of advantages to full frame, right? But there's so much more. It's a tiny little aspect of that. And yes, if you want to do that exactly to the last percent, fraction of a percent, then yes, you need this specific thing. But if you don't, then it doesn't matter. So don't focus on the camera. Focus on your model. Focus on your own mindset, on your own creativity, what you feel. That's 99.999% of the photograph, at least in my humble opinion. Please disagree, chat. Please disagree with me if you feel you need to disagree. Let's have this discussion.
Well, Pete, but I think when you're talking about the camera, I think that you need to include the glass. But even then, it really doesn't matter, because again, going back to the Stieglitz images, granted, those were probably taken by medium format, very large, you know, for lack of a better term, let's call them a very large sensor. But when
Very
you
large
look
image
at, like,
plane. A very
Mhm.
very large image plane.
Yeah, there we go, image plane. But when you look at, like, I went to well, it wasn't portraits, but it's the same idea. The Ansel Adams exhibit. Those images that were in the museum in the Getty were no more than maybe not 8 by 10, but let's say 16 by 20. They were not these big blown up images. They're small. And then who's the French photographer? Not Cartier-Bresson, but the one who did a lot of images of people in cabarets and in prostitutes and so on. Those were even smaller in the museum. So it's really, and then you look at at a lot of these photographs, they're not perfectly sharp, they're not perfectly clear, yet they still convey this sense of awe about the person or whatever that's being photographed. So in the long run, it's about that.
Right.
Because I know, and I've said this a million times, I still, I mean, I can take great portraits with my camera I've got now, but my D50 with its dinky little kit lens, I took some amazing portraits with those with that
Right.
kit. So it just, I mean, if I do say so myself,
No.
including a couple of self portraits, as a matter of fact. So yeah, you know,
But
it's just
since you mentioned the glass, of course. I mean, this is definitely a discussion to be had, right? But let's we have to. I think we have to be very very aware that a quote like that is a generalization, right? So,
yes,
of course, you cannot if you and not wanting to say that smartphone cameras are no good, quite the opposite. But of course you cannot take the classic um I don't know, since I did a couple of those, right? Wedding photograph of the bride and the groom, or like well, maybe you can take one of them, but I wouldn't want to shoot a wedding with a smartphone. So and
no,
simply because I don't get the results that I want to, I'd get different results, and probably if I'm not me, because I'm not really not a good photographer if it comes to smartphones. There are people out there that who are amazing,
no,
right? But
I
and I
know.
think if someone is really creative and knows the tool and can work with it, I think that would be an amazing thing. So I would love to see a wedding shot by someone who really knows how to work a smartphone with just a smartphone. That would be
Yeah,
fantastic. You can do angles that you can't do with any other camera. You have more wide angle, etc. You can probably get closer. So there's a lot we can do with every camera that we can't do with any other camera. So of course that is a thing, right? But so quotes are always taken out of a very specific context, and what comes to mind, and I don't have it in my list of quotes. There's this beautiful quote that I stumbled upon like a million times while looking for quotes for this conversation. And I forgot the name. I'm so bad with names. This classic quote that sharpness is a bourgeois concept. From by
Karl Marx.
pardon?
Karl Marx.
Oh, Marx. No, I don't think it's. Let me Google it. Sharpness is concept. Who was it from? Um, um, yeah, Henri Cartier-Bresson, of course, and
I kind of, yeah, yeah.
yeah, and which is a just it's a beautiful. I love that quote for so many reasons. And one of them is, and this is what I always felt with when reading that, it's don't take everything so fucking seriously. So it if it's what we do, right? And this is the one reason why I never, when um, in my early adult years, like in my 20s, well, if you want to call a 20-year-old adult. I actually no, now I don't. But so that's why I never really was so fond of analog photography, because and that changed a lot tremendously just a couple of years later. Is because now when we're sitting on a computer, right, with a screen like I have, and this is not even a big screen, it's a 24-inch screen, right? We have photographs full screen on that 24-inch monitor. And of course, a photograph taken with, like, I don't know, a snapshot camera, analog camera, blown up to that size at that short distance that we are, will never hold up. So, and that's same with digital photography. People pixel peep, they zoom in to the smallest, to 100, 200, 500%, and it stop doing that. Look at the photo and not. Of course, I'm the same, right? If it's completely out of focus, then I think twice whether to, well, completely out of focus. I don't use it anyway. But if it's slightly blurry, I think twice. But sometimes this exactly is it. So forget about how perfect the shot is. And this is, I don't think that the the sheer technical quality that modern cameras provide is the problem. That's what sometimes a lot of people paint this as a problem. Well, modern cameras are just way too sharp. It's no problem to make even the sharpest detail, full of detailed photo look not sharp. You just have to make it, eh, just reduce the size, right? Just make it as small as these photographs were, like, because you mentioned the size, right? Make it as small as the photographs were like 20, 25, 30, 40 years ago, and then suddenly, and then blow it up again, and you don't have any sharpness in them anymore. So it's,
Well,
and
but
that's why, and let me come back to the quote, and then I'm silent for an hour and let you talk. um it's that's why I love that quote, because it's kind of, it's that eye winking. I always saw it as an eye winking quote, in terms of stop to focus on that stupid camera and about how sharp that lens is. Focus on the photograph. Take pictures and don't make tech demos of your gear. And funnily enough,
well,
I read an article about that exact quote, where it came from, and I will find the article and put the link to the article in later into the description of YouTube, on YouTube, because that was kind of funny, because it seems, if that is correct, what is in that article, it was really kind of an eye winking thing by Cartier-Bresson, because he said that in a very old age, and he had a discussion with a friend about that, and he just said it was kind of a bit of self-deprecating humor, like saying, "Yeah, sharpness is a bourgeois concept," because he just couldn't hold the camera as steady anymore as he used to be. So that was in the art. I don't know if that's true, of course, but it kind of made sense to me, because I always saw this as an eye winking quote. So
so I two things. One of them is about the sharpness issue, and going back to the Alfred Stieglitz um, um, documentary. And Alfred Stieglitz, by the way, is considered, among several things, the father of modern photography, and actually, in a way, I would argue the actual father of street photography. Um, and because he started doing this, I want to say 1905. So it's very early in the 20th century. This is like 20, 30 years before Bresson. Um, and he had been doing photography, and he wanted to take some pictures living in New York of the snow and all that stuff, because it was a really bad storm. And he took this one photograph, which to me personally is not that great, but for the time it was considered controversial and new, because it was a coach with the horses drawing it and the snow, and it's a very contrasty. And the critiques that he got from his fellow photographers back in let's say 1905, was, and this is what was in the documentary, so I'm assuming it's true, that the photograph is not sharp enough. And this is back then. Okay, and yet that photograph became one of his iconic images. The other thing, I forgot what the other thing was about sharpness. Oh yes, and you mentioned the getting, like, when you put your picture, excuse me, let's say it's taken with a cheap little snap camera, digital camera and you put it on your computer and you see all the flaws. Well, that's what I've always found really interesting about this whole discussion of sharpness. When you're looking at a famous painting in a museum, no matter how great the artist was, there's always the imperfections of all the brush strokes. Sometimes that's on purpose, but even the ones that are very photographic in quality, when you start examining them up close, you see the pixels, if you will, of paint. So again, it's like with you, just, back the fuck up, look at it the way you're supposed to look at this shit, and let's move on. Next.
Let's not move on. James made a very, very great comment. Does the quote mean the model and the photographer both create the portrait? And I would say yes. They make it with the help of the camera, but also with the help of everything else, right? The lighting, the environment, the I don't know, the clothing, or the no clothing if it's nude photography, right?
Yes.
The pose, the expression, the way I see it, and please correct me if you have a different opinion, but a portrait is rather a discussion the photographer has with the model. If it's
a conversation.
It's a conversation, right? If it's staged photography, on the other hand, and if you're doing like more documentary style, then it's an observation. It's I personally prefer doing stuff like event photography for the simple reason that I love to be there and be part of it and to observe, and then it's communicating what I see in form of photographs to those people later that I make the photographs for, and sometimes it's just me, right? And I think this is also something, it's very close to probably street photography. If it's street photography with people, of course, street photography doesn't necessarily have to feature people. But yeah, I totally see the way the model and the photographer both create the portrait. The photographer sometimes guides the model. It's a conversation they have. And I just was it last week or was it this week? I forgot. I think it was last week. I did corporate portraits again, and it's definitely, at least in this specific type of portrait photography, it's really communicating with it's literally communicating. Hey, what do you? Because I'm not the person to pose people usually. I rather talk to them and try to make them feel at ease. I mean, of course, we can discuss whether was it you who, I think you last time you brought a quote by, doesn't matter. So in that case, it's of course it is about making people feel at ease, and I want them to present themselves the way they feel good about themselves, but I also want to please my client, right? And give them the photos that they can use. So I'm kind of the mediator between the person I photograph and my client. And also I do have a bit of a myself in how do I take the photograph, because there are a million ways, right, how to take a photograph.
Well, but I think, and you brought up, and I was thinking about this, and I think the quote you're thinking of is the one by Annie Leibovitz where she says that she falls in love with the person, but and it's a good example, and I'll tell you, I think it depends on the kind of photography you're doing. If it's, like you said, for a client, and if it's for a client who's the person, as opposed to maybe it's a client that's a corporation who's looking for very professional portraits. Or if you do what I do, which is just say, oh, I want to take your picture.
Mm.
And I've done the one time I've done the studio photography with a very professional setup that TJ did for me with my colleagues again, but it was my it was I was the client basically. So I don't know how I could do that, but I think for and then you also said, for example, the photographers who like to pose people in certain ways and so on. I don't think there's a set rule for
No.
me. And again, for somebody like Annie Leibovitz, who made that quote, I think it is a conversation. One of her most famous portraits is the one of Yoko Ono and
And
John Lennon, where he's in the fetal position naked, and if I'm not mistaken, to her right, and she's looking at the camera, and that was something that was impromptu. That was something that they came up with, and that was his pose. So I think it really and truly depends on what kind of photography you're going to do. I'll tell you what I do. When usually when I take a picture, I will ask the person, how do you sometimes I'll ask, how do you want to be seen? How do you want people to see you? Or one of my favorite things to do, and I'm going to finish with the story about this, I'll tell them to say shit. And I'll tell them to say shit because it's a lovely way, the way the mouth looks. And I do have a couple of pictures of people saying shit caught right at that moment. And there's the humor in it because it's unexpected. But the other thing is it loosens them up. And I don't know if any of you, and I don't see why you would remember, but I posted a set of 6 or 7 consecutive pictures of a friend of mine who was very shy at the beginning and looking down, and you could see that he was horrified in front of the camera. But then eventually he looked up and then he smiled a little, and then I told him to say shit, and I caught him at the moment, and then he's laughing and he's beaming. But it's not a professional portrait. This is for my own shits and giggles. So the reason I use that, I don't know if any of you are familiar with this, but there is a fur company, women's, I think, and maybe men's, called Black Glamma, that for at least 2 decades had these wonderful advertisements with what becomes a legend most, and then a famous woman, usually an actress or a singer, anywhere from Janet Jackson to Leontine Price to Barbara Streisand, and they were beautifully posed, Raquel Welch and Margaret. But there was the one with Barbara Stanwyck, and it was with this gorgeous long black fur coat. And the story goes that they were doing the shoot for at least an hour or 2, and they were not satisfied with the pictures. And all of a sudden she grabs a pair of scissors, but she says shit because she was so pissed off, and that was the image, and it caught her right when she's that position of the mouth. There's something delicious to me about it. That I thought, that's it. That's what I've got to do. And so that's what I use. Anyway, that's it. No more. So yes to your question.
Yeah. I want to add one tiny little thing because I really think, as to James' remark, I really do think that this was kind of the essence of what Steichen wanted to say. But on the other hand, I think there's more to that as well. It's not just the model and the photographer. There's the environment. I mentioned that before, right? There's the clothing. There's even what's behind the camera. And there's this when you're and like when you're on a film set, for example, right? It is super important to not have anything that isn't absolutely necessary behind the camera that can sort of distract the actors. And it's for me, it's the same with photography, right? There's this, if you want to Google that, it's this, well, it's on the one hand side an embarrassing story, Very embarrassing story for Christian Bale, because he had one a fight with a cinematographer. I think it was Hurlbut, when and it was kind of um, somehow captured. I don't know if was just an audio or even in video.
Yeah.
And when Hurlbut kind of went while filming, kind of did something, went through behind the camera, and Bale was completely thrown out, and he was super insulting and very abusive, and so there's everything influences everything. So yeah, but I really think that the essence
But
was
but but but
camera.
but again, I do think it does depend on the kind of photography you are going to, the kind
Definitely,
of portrait photography you're going to do.
absolutely.
Um, but in the end, I think in the long run, I would answer for most, because even if it's the professional portrait, you still want to bring out something about that person. So I would say almost always, to certain degrees. You mean you're not going to be in a professional shoot and tell them say shit, but
Why not?
you are going to.
Why not? Why not? Why not? Why not?
Actually, to be honest with you, I did that. Daniel, remember the guy who
Sure.
used to work? He lost his job because of COVID-19. Who was on with us like a year ago? He was shooting some students for his department, and he asked me to come along and hold the umbrella light, that because it was really windy, and I'm like, sure, I'll go. And for a while there, I was really quiet and let him do his thing. But there was one student who he was having a hard time making them feel comfortable. And I started to say, okay, you look like you're trying to look nerdy casual, and then the guy laughed. And then eventually I thought, you know what? And Daniel let me loose. And I was like, oh, say shit. And so
Right.
the last 3 or 4 portraits, they did that they were young students. They absolutely loved it. They felt really comfortable, because all of a sudden it became fun, and yet they produced some really great professional looking portraits.
Right. So
So there you go.
here's a quote by me, right? So we're not going to discuss that. Well, we can. I say a photographer, a real photographer, doesn't shoot analog or digital, doesn't shoot full frame or micro four third or APS-C. A real, or it doesn't edit or not edit. A photographer, a real photographer, does everything necessary to get the shot they want. So of course
That's it.
I'd use something like say shit, and I will definitely use this the next time if necessary. If it gets me the picture I want to have, then I'll use that. This is really, I mean, with all joking aside, this is what I learned with TV cameraman, a cameraman, a real cameraman, a TV, and especially TV cameraman, because they work under they cannot recreate something usually, right? News cameramen, they cannot recreate anything. So they will do everything possible to get the shot. They don't care about style. They don't care about technique. They use technique. Sure, they use technique and they use technical stuff. They do everything, and if full automatic will get them the picture they want, they will use full automatic. They will never admit it, but they will use it. And that is what I learned, like on my very first day, no, my second day of professional shooting, when I was still in contact with my professor, and I said, "How can I go? I have to do this, right? The day after, I had to do this. How do I go about?" And he said, "Well, just to put your camera on auto." I said, "You told me to never shoot auto." I said, "Well, you're never as fast as your automatic features on your camcorder. So of course
Yep.
use it when necessary." Right? And it was about exposure, right? Just use the right metering mode, and then you're fine. Because it was a cloudy day, and I had
Yep.
to shoot constantly changing lighting, and I was going insane. And I said, "How to go about that?" This is a shoot auto. put the camera on auto gain. So there's that. Okay, next.
Okay, next quote.
Next. Let me do. I love that. I don't know the I don't know who that is. I don't know who Sam Abell is, but I love that quote, and I'm really curious to hear what you have to say about it. Essentially, what a photography is life lit up.
Hmm. That's interesting because it takes me back to what you said about the portrait, and that's interesting. Because honestly, I don't necessarily, when I'm taking portraits, I don't, because I use all the time, 99.99% of the time, I use aperture
Priority.
um, priority. Thank you.
Priority.
Uh, so it's pretty much auto. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And I don't worry about light. And the more I've learned how to work with Camera Raw, which, by the way, I said last time that I was going to learn how to work Lightroom, but they have made Lightroom and Camera Raw almost exactly the same as far as the mechanics of it.
It was always exactly the same because Lightroom is basically a UI for Camera
Yes,
Raw.
yes, but there were some differences. Now it's
Yeah,
exactly the
slight
same.
differences, right? But it's the
Yeah,
same core engine, and
yeah,
it's just different
yes.
UI.
Yes. So I'm not a fan of the bridge and all that other shit. Let me do it my
Yeah.
way. So I use camera. So I don't worry. There's two reasons why I don't worry about light or any of that stuff is because one, I know I can, if it's a good photograph, I can probably fix it in Camera Raw. Number
Mm.
two, if it's not a good photograph, and I've said this a million times, you know what? I've taken many good photographs. This one sucks. I didn't get any good pictures of this person. Next.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's not the end of the world. It's not going to stop me from being a photographer, and it's not going to nullify all of the few good pictures I've taken before. So I don't worry about all of that. So this is making me really think, because to me it's just about the person, and I usually will do portraits up close. I'll just usually do like a face, maybe shoulders, but I tend to shoot very close. Which is a part of the relationship, which makes the camera disappear. But it is about catching that light in the person. It is about, even if it's not a pretty moment, even if it's like that moment with my friend where he's looking down and you can tell, at least to me, and it surprised me, it showed me a very vulnerable side of him that he never shows. And I didn't see it because I was worried about capturing. And when I looked at the picture, I went, holy fuck. So it did light him up, but it lit him up not necessarily in a whoopee-doo kind of the happy way, but it does light and expose life, or in this
Mm.
case, him. So yes, I think it can be totally. I still can't wrap my brain around it. Um, but yes, totally. Yeah. Wow. I'm gonna
What I
look
want
this guy up.
Yeah, what I want to say about Sam Bell is the little that I know about him is that he's a Nat Geo photographer, or very often featured in National Geography. So probably mostly a landscape photographer, or I don't know. I should I should have checked his work, of course. Um, but yeah, I think if I remember correctly, that he learned his craft from his father and all. So seems to be a very interesting person. I just love that. I just love that quote. Um, so what I take out of that is the way. You wanted to say something?
No.
What I take out of it is it's what a friend of mine once said about And this is really what made me think. And he said that, and again, a movie reference. And he said about my friend, I have to say, this is the friend that we talked about before we went live, who's a documentary filmmaker. And we were talking about um, our favorite directors, and which at least at that time, we both agreed on that the Coen brothers are at least in our top 10 of favorite directors. And he said, what I love about the Coen brothers movies is that they take that huge magnifying glass and put it on every character and blow up specific characteristics of specific characters. So they create they create larger than life characters by exaggeration. And this is what I see in that quote as well. Essentially, what photography is life lit up. So it's that moment, it's that scenery, that and this is what isn't that what we remember, right? What our memories are made of, right? When we think back about a specific day or period, that we remember that moment that kind of sums the whole thing up. And when you talk about, and I had a conversation with my dad lately about our first family holiday. And I have to say, I was like 2.5 years old. So I don't really remember a lot about that holiday. And he always says, well, and whenever that specific holiday comes up, he always mentions two things. And he said, do you remember the cow on the beach? Right? And I don't remember the cow. Of course, I was 2.5 years old. Of course, the one thing that I remember, that one of the two things that I remember is that he was shaving his beard off because he always had a beard, still has one. Now he has a full beard, right? Back then it was just a mustache. So, but that's how I know my dad, right? And this is the big shock. And even I was just 2.5 years old. Him shaving up his beard was like this. This is my memory. And the one thing when we went fishing on a pier. These are the two memories that I have, or two or three memories that I have from that holiday. So everyone remembers one or two things that are essential from a specific moment, right? That made that moment for him or her or them. And so photography, life lit up, is we take that one essential bit, that memory, not memory, that moment, and we blow it up to something that tells the whole story. And this is fascinating, right? So it's a symbol. A photograph is a symbol that is is like this like these endless spirals, right? So we can go, we make it go smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, and so the tiniest little bit, the atom. But now we know that atoms are not the smallest thing in our universe. We can even split up atoms, and probably can split up these even tinier things that they're made of, etc., etc., etc. So life lit up, it's the big explosion in the action movie that we remember, that happened because of everything else before that happened. The explosion at the end wouldn't have been possible without all the little step, all the plot points in the story, all these people talking to each other. And so it all inevitably led to that point, to that big explosion. And we take a photograph of that, which is like that tiny moment is the image of the whole. And that's why I love that quote.
By the way, you should look at his website. I went, and stunning photography, not completely what I expected.
Really?
I mean, not now necessarily, but
Do
yes.
that.
Yeah, no, I agree. All right. Anything else? Anybody have questions, comments, concerns about that quote? No. Next.
Next. So, um, here we go. Now I'll take a quote by a pretty. We talked about this guy in one of the past conversations, and
Okay.
so it's a quote by
Oh, ew.
Gilden, who is, for those of you who do not know Bruce Gilden. Bruce Gilden, and let's first read the quote. I love people. I love photograph, probably photography. I mean, I copied and pasted it. I mean, they're my friends. I've never met most of them, or I don't know them at all, yet through my images, I live with them. And for those of you who do not know Bruce Gilden or Bruce Gilden's work, Bruce Gilden is a very, how can I put that friendly, a very controversial street
Yes.
photographer. I think New Yorker who um, takes photos of people, very, very unflattering photos of people, very literally in your face photography with a flash. And I think I saw a documentary about him once, and I think he even has a flash in his hand. It's an off-camera
Yeah.
flash,
Yeah. Yeah.
and he literally used the flash in people's faces. And apparently, that's possible in New York. Here, you'd be arrested if you do that here. Um, so and these portraits are weirdly fascinating. I have to admit that I am on the one hand side. No, let me say I'm a fan of his photos, yet I hate his photos because they're so intrusive. They're also very, very fascinating. And I just think he's a very unpleasant. I never met him, of course, but also from the interviews that I saw with him, I think he's a very unpleasant person. So that's why I was super surprised to read a quote like that from Bruce Gilden. I love the people I photograph. Oh, I love the people I photograph. I misread before. I love the people I photograph. I mean, they're my friends. I never met most of them, or I don't know them at all. Yet, through my images, I live with them. So that made me think. But please, you go first.
No, honestly, I have nothing to say because I think this is bullshit. I think he's a rude, very rude person who doesn't give a rat's ass about the people he photographs. Again, I can understand taking unflattering pictures of people, but he has no respect for people. And yes, some of his pictures are fascinating to a point, but to me, it's about the same as there's a website called People of Walmart or something like that, where people take pictures of people in Walmart with their asses hanging out or dressed stupid or being, and it's like, I'm sorry, but I mean, yes, that happens, but that's disrespectful, you know. And by the way, the law in the United States, not New York, is if you're in a public place, you can be photographed.
Mhm.
You because you're in a public place, you do not have any legal right to expect privacy because you are in public. However, and I've always been, and I posted something, I want to say about a week ago, an article about this one person who was talking about this exactly and talked about Bruce Gilden exactly. Um, I, for one, and I've done this and I will keep doing this, and also because I've learned because of my experiences, um, there is the legal right, but there's also the human compassion and empathy. And I think this guy has none of that. And for him to say something like that, I don't care. I have nothing to say, and that's all I've got to say. I don't believe it, or else he wouldn't do that. So
Totally,
yeah, that's it.
totally get you. Totally get you. I have similar feeling, um, because there's a thing. I mean, of course, and I'm this is my personal opinion. I'm not I don't know him. I never talked to him personally, but I totally see what you mean. And here's the thing: I love the people I photograph. Someone like him saying something like that. If you love a person, I think he has a very, very distorted view of the word love. I mean, there are a lot of ways how you can love a person, but he certainly does not love this person he takes a photo of. He loves to see an interesting photograph, but it's just like what you said. I also think he doesn't give a rat's ass about this person, how this person feels. So there's no empathy in photography like that. So that's definitely what I see. And I think we're safe to say that there's no empathy because you can take unflattering photos of people, even of strangers. But if you have just a tiny little bit of empathy, then you ask them if you can use this photograph. And that's not what he does, at least not according to the documentary I saw about him. So he just took photos and went
And let's say
along. And
yeah,
since
no,
people
he'll
can
yeah,
do anything, have no legal way of saying, "Hey, you can't use that," because well, it's allowed, right? It's legal, so they can do it. So the only thing probably, and it's not allowed. And I don't condone violence in any way, but it's not allowed to punch someone in the face. So that's probably the reason why he doesn't get punched in the face a lot. I think he does get punched in the
well,
face, but I
he
think the only
might,
reason why he doesn't get punched in the face all of the freaking time is because that is not allowed, which is a weird
right.
law. Kind of, and not that
Well,
we're not allowed to punch people in the faces, but to take photos of people without their consent, just
well,
because.
but here's the thing too. The other thing is, I don't know if you remember the documentary, he doesn't just stand around, take their picture, and then he takes their picture and then
Yeah,
runs.
right,
So
and he
he
walks straight
completely
to them,
tries to,
right? He picks
yeah,
his
he'll walk right up to them,
victims.
take the picture, and then keep going and run. And
Yeah,
actually, I saw the same kind of procedure with this guy in Japan who's apparently a
yeah.
star street photographer. And I'm like,
Yeah, we talked about that.
really? And so to me, because to me, so to contrast, you have, and again, this was my quote last time, Annie Leibovitz quote, I love I fall in love with the people I photograph while I'm photographing them, or something to that effect. And what I remember mentioning was that I saw a documentary. I've seen several documentaries on her, but there was one where somebody brought up the fact that the reason celebrities trust her and that they will do picture and that she is able to catch moments like the one with Yoko Ono and John Lennon, like the one with ¿cómo se llama esta mujer? Um, the blonde actress Meryl Streep with the white makeup on her face
Mhm.
where she's pulling on her face and it's a close up. The one of Whoopi Goldberg where she's in a bathtub full of milk and all you see is
Yeah,
her face and her hands. They trust her enough to let her take risks and do all these things because they get that sense of it might not be a flattering photograph like the Meryl Streep one, but there's still a sense of beauty to this
right.
and a sense of understanding that you fall in love with the person. So
And
yeah, I
there's the thing. I mean, I think this is the essence, and I think the essence here is indeed the word beauty, because beauty is not necessarily pretty. Two
no
different things, very different things. Beauty has to do with respect. Beauty has to do with sincerity. Beauty has to do with empathy. And what Bruce Gilden does, at least in my personal opinion and my personal view, is he makes, and this is the same thing as I mentioned before. Like he takes that big magnifying glass and he makes caricatures out of people, and that without
Yes.
their consent. And he presents people in probably the worst way you can. So, because what we see on these photographs by Bruce Gilden is not what is reality. I mean, no photograph shows reality, of course not. But this is just an overblown image, and an over and uh, making people look bad, deliberately
Yes.
making people look bad, not necessarily by the act of photographing them in that way. Because of even if we pose people, there are photos that when people just look stupid or bad, or I don't want to say the word or use the word ugly because this is not a word that I use, but these are photos that you throw away because it doesn't
Yes.
represent the person. And these photographs also do
Where
not represent the person. And I think this is one thing. Let me just or sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Well, no, no, but that's interesting because it goes back to James' question, where the conversation between you and the person you're photographing, yeah, that does not work. There is no there's a conversation that it's doing this, it's not doing
Right.
this, so it's not.
It's not
Yes,
working
yes,
together, it's basically working
yeah,
basically
yeah,
fighting each other, which is definitely it's definitely, and it is definitely interesting. No
yes,
question
can
about that. An interesting photograph, and so, well, where's the validity, right? It's interesting. It's kind of the same question whether it's okay to build an H bomb just because we can, right? It's the Oppenheimer question, just in
yes,
the art world. Just because I can, this is a question
yeah,
of morals to an extent. I think it would be fascinating. I would applaud everyone. I'd applaud everyone if they say, "Hey, I consent to um, you taking the most unflattering photos of me." And this is, of course, well, if we consent to something, that then it's already it's like we change. Of course, we influence the result automatically, and so, but maybe that's the thing, creating this tension. And we have to work. I probably have to work a long time together to forget that this is something that is to an extent also staged. Because if I consent to, well, take the most unflattering photos of me that you want, or take every photo of me that you want to, doesn't have to be unflattering, but just take photos of me, and I'll do my thing and you take photos of me, and then, well, it probably takes a long time to forget that this person is there. And probably it's not even possible that to really forget it. So of course these will be different pictures. That is an experiment that I would love to see, and I would applaud everyone to do that. But I think, in my personal opinion, what Bruce Gilden and people like him do is immoral. And it's not just amoral, it's immoral, because it's working against people's consent. Amy has a question. Amy, so my question is, after listening to you on this, we are all looking for a niche. Are there some subjects or methods that shouldn't be done, if that makes sense? I, I think for me the only subject or method is that shouldn't be done is if it's non-consensual. There's a thing in Germany, and I was shocked. I was literally shocked to my bones to read that. It was a couple of weeks ago when in Germany a law was passed that prohibits so-called upskirting, meaning taking
oh
photographs
yeah,
of women of yeah, up women's skirts. That law was passed, and I was shocked to read that there's a law necessary to specifically prohibit that you take a photo, so an unconsensual, non-consensual photo of up a woman's skirt. There is a law necessary to do that, and that's what shocked me. So everything that is non-consensual should be prohibited. And yeah, of course, there have to be exceptions. Like we had this discussion, not we, but there was this discussion lately. I don't know on the news whether you probably you probably saw it. It was all over the news. Whether something is of public interest. So can a private company? I don't want to name it, but you know what I mean. Private company um, can a private company um, use their own terms of service against everyone? Yes or no? And I say yes, they should. This has nothing to do with censorship. This is just the most stupid bullshit that I ever heard when people say this is censorship. It's not censorship. It's just terms of service and community guidelines. And no matter who it is, if they go against it, they should be deleted or banned or whatever. So, but yes, if it's of public interest, some things we need to show something. I think we shouldn't be showing. Well, on the other hand, look what's happening right now about showing a person's death. Sometimes it's necessary. So public interest is the only exception for non-consensual. But this is, of course, something that has to be decided by jurisdiction, in my personal opinion. Yeah. Anything to
So
add?
sorry, the last like 5 minutes from when I got up because my battery is dying, I did not hear a word
Okay.
you said.
I
It
will
was
try.
all broken up because
I will try to repeat it in one short sentence. I think that the own that subjects or methods shouldn't be done. Everything that is non-consensual should be off the limits unless it's of public interest. And we sadly saw some examples of public interest which were completely beyond borders of what should be allowed, or what is allowed, actually is allowed in the last months. But these were necessary and they were of public interest. So I think it was necessary to show these things. And but well, that's the question, right? Whether this is a niche, shouldn't be a niche. So non-consensual things should be, in my
so
personal opinion, beyond any kind of anything that anyone should even try to do, if that makes sense.
so I yeah, no, and it's funny because when you mentioned not consensual, when we were in when I was in Munich and we went to the English Gardens and we were watching the surfers.
Mhm.
I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah,
There's a little stream in the English Gardens in Munich where I don't know how they do it, but there's this wave action. That's not really waves, but there's a lot of current, and
yeah,
there's men mostly, but some women who get in their wetsuits and get on their surfboards and they do these surfing motions. I mean, it was fascinating. We were there for like half an hour. And I took a couple of pictures, and there's two specifically, maybe three, but there's two specifically that I thought were really good. And one of them is of one of the surfers looking back over his shoulder and away. Well, not but yeah, it was non-consensual. But to me, that was also a space of performance, a space where so many. Actually, Sean Tucker was in Munich a couple of years ago and took pictures there as well and got some really nice shots. So I think yes, I think the non-consensual thing to a point, but again, it depends. I think if you're being respectful, now I do tend to usually ask people in the street, can I take your picture? If it's, for example, at the Black Lives Movement Matter march, then no, because that's a public, I don't want to say a performance, but that's a public event where you're participating and you know you're going to be recorded or photographed. But I think even if it is consensual or not, I still think that whatever you do, that's up to you as long as there is some respect of the person. Um,
But
and again, I go back to
I don't
what I
know
said before.
if there's a difference, at least the way I see it. Oops, did I do? No, Fern is gone. Okay, Fern is gone. So I think there is a difference between he has to just use the link again. No, device is not connected. Add to stream. So lost connection probably. So now he's back. So I think there's a big question, and that's what you mentioned about New York, when it is apparently legal as long as you're in public space to take photographs. I think this is something here. I The way I see it is in Germany the laws are a bit, or in Europe I think I don't know if they're European laws or German laws. I personally do think it's a bit too strict, but um, here it's a question not necessarily too strict, but rather it's a kind of blurry thing. It's if you pick out a person from a group and you make something like about that person, make a photograph about that person, you need
Right.
their consent. If the person is just kind of a part of the whole picture. If you take a photo, if you I don't know, if you go, let's take the English Gardens, right? There's this Greek temple in the English Garden. If you take a photo of that Greek temple and there are like 5 people lying in the sun and you can hardly recognize them, yeah, it's okay because it's not about those people. If you take a photo of those people lying in the, and then there's kind of that rule of thumb about, yeah, 15 people. If it's 15 people or more, you can take, don't single people don't single persons out. This is kind of sort of the rule of thumb, but of course if someone, probably you'd lose that lawsuit. So yeah, public events, like when you're on an event, like, I don't know, I think a demonstration, if you take photos of a demonstration, you know what you're going into. People can take photos of you. I don't know if that is the fact here. I know the last demonstration I was at, when the police was filming people, which was weird, and there was a huge outcry, which was, I think, a very, very legit outcry, that police was filming the protesters, which was completely a no-go in my personal opinion. But I don't know if that is legal. I'm not a legal expert. So none of what we say is in any way anything that is legally binding or anything. But so yeah, I think there should be, like I was on years ago, because I was curious and I was young and I needed the money. No, there was no money involved, but I was curious and I was like on a how can I put that family friendly? Let's say it was a fair of an adult themed fair, and I was curious, so I went there, and there was on the ticket, it explicitly said that if by entering you agree that people might take photos of you. So there's this
Oh
big,
no.
yeah. So of course, I went in there, and if people take photos of me there, I have to whatever they do with these photographs, I'm fine with that. And so have to be fine with that. And the thing is, I never showed any of those photos that I took. I took like 4 or 5, and then I stopped because I was kind of appalled by what's going on, and I went very quickly, even though the entrance fee was quite high. But um, so yeah, it should be there should be definitely places, or like, I don't know, if people take photos of me in public space, I probably this is the thing, I wouldn't like it if it's an unflattering photo. But you can't make a law probably to say, well, unflattering photos are not allowed, flattering photos are allowed, because who defines what's flattering or not? So I have to say that in my personal opinion, and this is not judging anyone, right? At least I wouldn't do that live on on YouTube. I personally find like 90% of the street photography that I see every day on social media questionable. Just taking photos of people who, I mean, I don't know. Of course, I don't know. And the benefit of the doubt, maybe they ask those people. I don't know.
Right.
If there's a street performer, he or she or them, they give content consent. In my personal opinion, if they do street performance, then yeah. And I personally have no problem taking photos of people standing around, because this is street performance is the same as they stop and watch, and they stop and watch someone doing something they want to be photographed for, I want to be seen. And if I stop there and watch them, then yeah, I take part in this whole thing. So that's the thing that personally say, hey, this is giving consent to being part of this performance, and therefore the performance is. And if they signal, hey, no photos of me, then not. But then they have to signal that. That's my personal opinion. So that's where I would draw the line. I would never take a photo of anyone just walking around, at least not in a way that they are in some way recognizable as an individual, like, hey, that's John Smith kissing that blonde who is not his wife. So
Oh, stop. Okay,
it was
next.
grandmother, by the way. So yeah, next. So um, let's take another famous one. Irving Penn. A good photograph is one that communicates a fact, touches the heart, and leaves the viewer a changed person for having seen it. It is, in a word, effective. I will never ever take a photograph again after that quote.
Oh, see, I that's interesting because I don't now. What's interesting about Irving Penn is I immediately thought of. I mean, he did fashion photography. He was brilliant. He did portraiture, which I think in a lot of ways is better than Richard Avedon's very blank, very unemotional portraits that he became famous for. But he also did still lifes and still life photography, and I'm wondering. I mean, yes, I mean it's effective. Some of it's gorgeous, yada yada. But I don't know that it communicates a fact. It does touch the heart. So I think this is very broad. I do like the very end. It is, in a word, effective. And
But
again, I don't know how you would judge that, because if I think it's effective as the photographer, that doesn't mean that you're going to look at it, especially one of his still lifes, and get whatever meaning or whatever, you know what I mean? And actually, I'm also thinking of Carol Ray, who does all these gorgeous still lifes and uh, she tries she has a certain message that she wants to convey. They are effective in a lot of ways, but you don't know. So yeah, I think it depends who you're asking. If are you asking the photographer, is it effective? Do you think that you were effective in what you tried to convey, or are you asking each and every person that looks at it if it's effective? And that opens it up to a whole, just way too many interpretations and ways of looking and reading an image yeah. So I don't disagree, but it's a tough one.
Yeah, definitely. I have my problems with the first part. Communicates a fact. So that completely leaves out all sorts of abstract photography because they by definition do not communicate a fact. Touching the heart, I kind of agree. I think emotion um, is a huge part in every sort of in every genre of photography. I really do see that, and it doesn't necessarily have to be this heartbreaking or uplifting or depressing or whatever type of photography. It's just there we are even just a pretty flower photo can be touching the heart. And I think this for me, this is a very kind of the most important thing. It's just I mean, landscape mostly a lot of landscape photography from my side. This is for me, this is pure emotion, like the vastness or just wow. For me, I go for the in some cases, not in all cases, I go for the wow effect. And I think what I personally feel is that, and I totally agree with you that I love the end. It is in a word effective. I think the word effective has such a bad rap. It's he's just going for effect, or she's just going for effect. So what? We all go for effect. And if just the effect that someone says, this is a great photograph, if that is the effect you're going for, then you're going for effect. One of the greatest, in my personal opinion, one of the greatest American authors of all times, in my personal opinion, is Edgar Allan Poe. All his stories, all his poems are only a fact. This is just a fact. And if you read, and this is a poem that you have to read aloud or listen to, the Raven, which is, in my personal opinion, one of the greatest poems of all time. And not this is it has become a cliche, yes, definitely, but it is look at that poem. This is perfect from the beginning to the end, but it's effect in every line. It just punches you through the whole thing, and I just and and so yeah, sure, a good photograph is, in a word, effective. It does something with you, and it does something to you, definitely. And I think this is indeed the essence of photography. But there's one thing that I think is overlooked a lot is and we mentioned that in the past conversations also quite a couple of times, that what we rarely talk about is that a single photograph is usually worth nothing, because it's always about the context, and the context is very often the body of work, right? And no photograph ever, no painting. Look at the Mona Lisa by Da Vinci. If you'd seen that painting somewhere without having the context of Da Vinci, you just see a smiling woman and you probably wouldn't care. Nobody would here for I don't know. It's a great picture, it's a great painting, but it's not no, see, I don't wanna put that painting down, not saying that it's not a great painting, but the mythology, the whole thing that this has become an icon. People pray to that. They don't probably, some do, everyone. There's certainly one person at least that does that. But this whole it's lifted beyond like everyone or like everything else. And yeah, it's a great it's a if I would have painted this, nobody would care for that painting. They would probably say, "Hey, it's a good painting, great painting," but nobody would care. It's because it's a Da Vinci painting. Because there's the whole
Yeah.
context of Da Vinci in that painting. That's what makes this painting amazing, beyond larger than life, larger than than portraiture itself. So every single great one of the masters made, right, is a great photograph. But the meaning of that photograph, that is also connected to the body of work of that, usually. Yeah, probably exceptions, but usually also to the body of work of the photographer, or the context of the person. The photograph you talked about, John Lennon, Yoko Ono, would that be that iconic photograph if it wasn't John Lennon and Yoko Ono, but John Smith and Jane Doe?
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Well, no, but I mean, I disagree and I agree with you. Because again, it could be. I'll give you a perfect example. I saw Picasso's Guernica, and I'm like, that's it. I mean, it was just so. I mean, no big whoop. I mean, it's a fascinating. Yes, I get the story and everything. And then there was the other one that I saw that was what's the one? Well, another a different example. You see the Statue of Liberty, and yes, it's the Statue of Liberty and yada yada. But when you actually see the Statue of Liberty, it's like that's it.
Yeah.
At least for me. I mean, it was an emotional moment because it's the Statue of Liberty and the whole mythology. But I think in this case, that kind of thing doesn't necessarily apply. It can, but what I think is interesting is that and it goes back to that communicates a fact. Irving Penn made his name photographing fashion. That has nothing to do with facts, except maybe the fact is that somebody chose this dress to be in Vogue or
No,
Vanity
the
Fair
fact
or you
the
know
fact
what I
is
mean?
expensive shoe.
Yeah, well, no, it wasn't always. It's not
I
always
know,
about the expensive,
that was a joke.
but it is
I
about
think
what's
it was a
in.
good
So
joke.
there is that fact, but it's not. Yeah, it's not. So yeah, I don't know what to, but I do like the effectiveness. And effectiveness, there's no way
Yeah.
judging that.
See, there's
Although
a
I
thing
will say I would love to see the Mona Lisa.
what I was thinking lately a
Not
lot
because it's what
what I was thinking lately a lot about, especially about the internet, right? When you do stuff, there's so many people, thousands, hundred thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people who do great things. Yes, there are just a handful who are really extraordinary. No question about that. No question about it. But doing one extraordinary thing doesn't make you a genius, because one extraordinary thing is everyone once in their lifetime, and I'm absolutely convinced about that. Everyone does at least one extraordinary thing once in their lifetime. Some take an extraordinary photograph, others paint an extraordinary photo, others make have an extraordinary beautiful garden. Nobody knows about that. Others make so it doesn't have to be the huge thing. So the thing is, the especially on the internet, it's number one, the consistency, and it's the other, the next thing, and this is the what becomes is over the years harder and harder and harder to somehow stand out. And I think the standing out is consistency and reinventing what you do, and finding new
Well,
ways to either do something completely different or do the same thing in a different way. And so it's always the body of work, because no matter what it is, right? You look at something and you say, well, it's great, but XYZ did the same thing and even better. And this can be depressing on the one hand side. On the other hand side, it's super liberating, because there's no need. You don't need to compete with everyone, with anyone anymore, because everything has been done already. So you can do your thing, and you can just bathe in your thing. Yeah, sure. If you're striving for being admired for being a genius, then you have a hard time now, because it's hard. It's harder than it ever was before. And but I
see,
personally
I
liberating.
don't think so. I don't think so. I think that in the end, it's always about the what you said, but also about the getting noticed and being at the right place at the right time,
Right,
and to a certain
right.
degree, love, having the personality and all that stuff. Yes, there's a lot more work that's put out there, but and by the way, we've been talking for over an hour and a half. I think it's time to. Um, but
That's
yeah,
actually what we started an hour later.
I think I think reading the book about Da Vinci, that I just kind of read every once in a while. That's a part of, he had all the work and he did all this stuff, and he did get noticed and he didn't get noticed, but it wasn't even during his lifetime necessarily that he got as much acclaim, and
No,
he failed miserably at some things, and yet he was also a genius at others. So it doesn't matter. You look at, there's a woman called Hilma F Klimt, which is similar to the painter. And she was a German woman who painted these gorgeous works. And I just saw a documentary about her. She didn't want to be recognized. She didn't want to become a part of the art world, because that's the whole thing. You've got like this guy Coons who make these balloon dogs and in metal, and there he's a genius, or he'll take paintings of famous artists and put a hole in them, and he's a genius. It just depends on so many factors that you it has to go back to what we've said so many
yeah.
said. Yeah, I'm tired. We need
Then
to finish.
we're
Said
back.
so
We're
often, which
back.
is
Here,
you have
here
to
we
do
are.
what you want.
Right here we are at the one thing other than being effective, and that is touching the heart.
Yeah,
And if you, this is the only thing, in my personal opinion, the only thing you can really reach people is by touching their hearts. You can have all the facts that you want. If you can touch their heart in some way, y- people will not remember what you told them. People will only remember how you made them feel. And I don't know who said
that's
that,
it. Yeah,
but that's the
Maya
thing.
Angelou.
Yes. And that's the thing. And I think this is the big challenge that we have in, probably in this time, or in during these times, and also in the future, that the generations after us will have to face. And I think this is the big mess that we are in right now. So that science is in their infancy, if it comes to communicating in a way to touch people's hearts, because science only gives facts. And every person who learned how to touch people's emotions in one way or the other will always, always, always win over facts, because people stop thinking when they feel something. And this is the big problem. And I think we're on a good way. There's so many science educators now who slowly start to learn how to teach people in a way that they will accept facts and see facts and learn to think. I think we're on a, I'm a positive thinking person, so I think we're on a good way. There are a lot of people out there who do that now, and so maybe in 4, 5, 600 years, where humanity, in case humanity survives that long, we're on a way when we can finally also accept facts in a way we can accept idiots who just just transport feelings. So on that
No
note,
comment.
on that note, that from me, from not who's not a scientist, right? The scientist is on the other end. Um, well, I studied a science, right? Two actually, three actually. So never. Okay, so let's wrap this up. It was a blast, even though we did it on a different day, and even though we did it at a different time. And so let us know if this is a time. I saw it on the viewer counter that we did have a couple less viewers than we usually have. Well, we will see whether this will show in the views later. I don't really care for numbers. It's fun doing that, and it's fun. It's having you guys, girls, children of all ages on the chat. So next time we'll be not talking about quotes, we'll be talking about something else. If you want to take part in this directly by being with us on the show, either with video and audio or with audio only, you can do that, of course. Some people are not comfortable, which is totally fine with us. So please don't be shy in terms of asking us whether we just talk with us. We don't bite. We just, yeah, we want to talk with you. So um, on the chat, Eduardo writes, very true, Pete. Facts and what we want to heard or feel more comfortable is all. I can show it. Always forget. Facts and what we want to hear or feel more comfortable is all a different game. Yes, it is, Eduardo. But well, that's our challenge. Our challenge, the challenge that we have as reasonable people, right? So thank you all for being part of this today, and we'll see you, hear you the next time. It was fun. Are there any topics that you want us to talk about? Is there anything you wanna talk about with us? If is there anything that you want to tell, right? If you have a great photography story, or if you want to show us something or show people something that we or want to discuss with us on the show, please message either on Tumblr at tvoom, that is TVOOM on Tumblr, that is my blog, or all things Fern in one word on Tumblr, or you can also, of course, email me. My email, you find my email on my blog, tvoom.tumblr.com in the About section, or on my YouTube in the About section. So let's talk. Let's talk photography. Have a nice rest of the Sunday. Thank you, Fern. It was a blast. And bye bye. Till next time. I have to end the podcast.
Bye.
Bye bye.